HOA Karen builds a garage on my property, but I'm not in the HOA. Well, I thought my chill little town was immune to the evil HOA Karenism that lurked beyond. Little did I know, my tranquility would be screwed up by the arrival of HOA Karen. It all began innocently enough. I moved into a nice little house nestled in a neighborhood that was super friendly. I reveled in the freedom of not being bound by the shackles of a homeowners association, which, in my mind, only served to stifle individuality and suffocate the spirit of independence. In other less fancy-pants words, they suck. As the weeks rolled by, a new family moved in next door. Karen and her seemingly innocent family. At first, our interactions were polite and respectful. I exchanged pleasantries and even helped them unload their moving truck. Little did I know that beneath that exterior lurked the notorious HOA Karen, an ugly title that she wore with pride. One sunny afternoon, as I returned from work, I was greeted by a sight that left my jaw dropping to the floor. Some garage had sprung up on my property line like a weed in a yard. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was ticked off, angry, and confused, all in one. Storming next door, I confronted Karen, demanding an explanation for this blatant intrusion. With a condescending smirk, she informed me that the HOA had granted her permission to build the garage, claiming it would, and I quote, enhance the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. Blah. Aghast, I reminded her that I was not a member of the HOA, and my property was none of their concern. Giving two craps, Karen dismissed my protest, insisting that the HOA's jurisdiction extended to all homes in the vicinity. I'm just beyond ticked off at this point, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and I sought legal advice. With the help of a lawyer, I initiated a lawsuit against Karen for trespassing and encroachment on my property. The courtroom became the zone where my fight against HOA tyranny would unfold. Karen, adorned in her signature bob haircut and an air of entitlement, attempted to paint herself as the neighborhood's savior. However, my legal team presented evidence of her audacious encroachment, leaving no room for her stupid web of lies. As the proceedings progressed, I found solace in the pursuit of justice. The courtroom drama became a spectacle that gripped the neighborhood, and whispers of HOA Karen echoed through the community. I was determined to show that even in the absence of an HOA membership, property rights and justice would prevail. The decisive moment arrived when the judge ruled in my favor. Karen's attempt to overstep her boundaries and impose her will on my property crumbled under the weight of legal scrutiny. She was ordered to dismantle the unauthorized garage and restore my land to its original state and pay a hefty little chunk of change. Justice had triumphed, but the battle had taken its toll on the neighborhood's harmony. Defeated and humiliated, Karen reluctantly complied with the court order. The dismantling of the garage became a symbolic victory for individual property rights and a sobering lesson for those who believed that they could impose their will without consequences. The repercussions extended beyond Karen's property lines. The neighborhood, once united, now bore the scars of a decisive conflict. Whispers of resentment lingered, and the once friendly atmosphere had been tainted by the specter of HOA interference. However, the victory was mine, and I stood firm in my belief that no one could trample over the rights of an independent homeowner. In the aftermath of the legal battle, Karen's house sported a for sale sign. The once proud enforcer of HOA regulations was now a pariah, shunned by the community that she sought to control. The neighborhood, scarred but resilient, gradually healed from the ordeal. As Karen packed her belongings and said goodbye to our community, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. I had won, and the little guy had triumphed over the oppressive whims of the HOA. The echo of Karen's departure served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the spirit of independence and the sanctity of property rights should be upheld, even in the face of overbearing neighbors. The scars of the legal battle faded, and the neighborhood slowly rediscovered its sense of unity. I continued to relish in the freedom that came with not being tethered to an HOA, grateful for the lessons learned and the victory won. The chapter of HOA Karen had come to a close, finally, and it taught me and the rest of us a lesson. Don't let HOA Karen run over you. Her lies won't stand up if you do. Whatever was going through this crazy HOA Karen's mind, none of us will ever truly know, but how do you think you're going to get away with building a garage on somebody's property? I like my property. If I don't want a garage on it, I shouldn't have to have it. And if it is, it's going to be mine. What have you done? I would have definitely sued and pursued legal action against HOA Karen. Wannabe HOA attempts to use cops, ATF, and DFW to have my firearms removed. Technical Freedom 60 posts this. So around 3 years ago, I moved out of my childhood home and took on the world alone. I spent a year drifting until I got an amazing job in a smaller town in my state. They assisted me with moving in. I paid the down payment and then I moved in. In the process of moving things out, my dad helped me move all my hunting equipment and my other vehicle from their house to mine. While we were unloading all my firearms, they were in black locked cases, I noticed a few of the neighbors staring and talking to each other. Now, for reference, my state is fairly democratic, but the majority of people are somewhere in the middle of the road and they don't really lean towards one side. I don't really mind it. I got everything locked up and secured and became ready to move in with the rest of my items. And the first month was fine. I made friends with an elderly woman who lived next to me. We oftentimes sat on her porch and shared a drink and stories. But around week 5, things didn't go so well. I left my house early in the morning to meet with a few friends to hunt rabbits. I was loading my shotgun into my truck and left. I got home roughly around 9ish and found a note on my house saying that the local assembly has been notified of suspicious behavior and they requested that I appear at the next meeting. So I do show up a little overdressed, and they bring up that a few of my neighbors feel uncomfortable with me openly leaving my house with guns. And I'll be honest, I could believe them. I'm easily the youngest person there by 12 years, so I speak up and I tell them that I own my firearms for hunting. The group is pleased, or so it seems. For the next week, I continue on with my day-to-day life, getting dirty looks and the occasional comment about owning so many guns. I own 4, all for hunting besides my handgun. I am careful not to engage in many of the conversations, as I've heard of people getting in trouble for being the aggressor that way. Well, one day, I'm on my couch with a few friends watching the original Red Dawn, and I get a loud knock at the door. So me and a friend go to answer, and there's 2 officers at the door. They notify me of a complaint of gunshots and a scream. Well, I tell them, hey, that's likely our movie. From my front door, you can see into my living room. They can see my 2 friends sitting on the couch screaming Wolverines, and they just ask us to turn it down, so we do. A few hours later, the assembly president shows up with a notice, an invitation to another meeting to vote on new policy. The next day, the meeting is commencing, and they announce the issue of the meeting: to vote on a limit of firearms per household, as petitioned by a few families. The first one came on the stage to discuss why we should vote in favor of this. As a mother of 4, I feel afraid for my children with the amount of guns in this nation. Watching the news, I've seen the recent murder shootings and atrocities, and I fear that my children, husband, or myself could be next. This is a community of peaceful, good Americans, and I believe that we can overcome this by voting in favor of this limitation, she said. Now there's appraisal of a middle-aged woman and the first speaker, and the elderly man came up next. When I was young, though many people had guns, it was usually one: a shotgun to protect your family, a ranch rifle to protect livestock or for hunting. We didn't have fancy guns, just the bare minimum. These 2 got the crowd riled up, and people began to vote. 112 voted yes, and 25 voted no. I voted that I wouldn't listen to the rule, as it can't be enforced. They didn't like that. They asked me to leave the meeting, so I did. A few days later, I was noticing being pretty much ignored, whether it was driving home or heading out. Offering to help the elderly man carry boxes, he just ignored me. And then one day, coming home, I saw what all gun owners fear: an all-black SUV in my driveway and ATF agents standing by my door. When I pulled up, they told me to stay in the vehicle and asked me multiple questions. How many guns do you own? Are you making straw man purchases? I refused to answer basically everything until they asked me to let them search my house. I asked if they had a warrant, and they said no, so I asked them to leave and that they could come back if they got one. 3 hours later, they're at my door with a warrant, stating that, due to complaints and beliefs of suspicious acts, they're going to search my house. Well, dang, I can't stop them, so I let them do the search. They find my handgun locked in my case. My rifle's in their cases and nothing else. I give them copies of my paperwork and proof of ownership, and they take that and they leave me and my guns alone. And at this point, I'm scared. They've called the cops, they've called the ATF. What's next? A siege of my house? A raid by the local SWAT team? No, it's the DFW, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. They come a few days later after my latest hunting trip, saying they got reports from my neighbors that I'm a poacher, as they find it suspicious how often I go hunting. They ask me questions about my recent hunts, and I tell them it's mainly rabbits, and in my state, the jackrabbit is open all year round, and the occasional coyote hunt that I do for a farmer in my hometown. Now in my state, you can hunt coyotes almost all year round if you have proof that they're a danger to your livestock or pets. They ask about the coyotes, and I tell them about the farmer losing some sheep and chickens to a pack of coyotes, and then I give them his phone number to verify. They take that and they leave, calling me back the next day, apologizing for the inconvenience and that everything checked out. At this point, I sought legal aid. I was absolutely terrified that I would lose an important way of life and my rights to them. I confided in my elderly neighbor that she likes me. She voted against the firearm restrictions and always stood up for me at the meetings. She helped me find a lawyer. He went over the assembly's past and found that they have no legal power as they're not a real HOA, and they helped me build a case for harassment. After nearly a year, I sued the assembly and everyone in it. I won. I didn't win any money or anything, just got all of it to stop. Multiple conversations with the police and the ATF. It all stopped. I left a few months later and I moved back home. I bought a smaller house on 60 acres of land, and I have neighbors who respect me. Do you agree with this comment? I am definitely not a fan of guns in the least, but that was straight up harassment. Having them safely locked in cases versus strapped on your shoulder at the grocery store are two very different situations. Good for you for not answering any questions without a lawyer. What do you think? Concerned neighbor will set the apartment on fire, posted by famous chip 9386. Hello, I'm 26 female and my neighbor is 65 female. Recently, I got a new neighbor. We live in a duplex and she's in the other unit that shares a roof and a wall with me. The first night she moved in, I heard her fire alarm go off and I went outside to see her back door open and smoke coming out of it. I went over and her oven had started smoking, but she unplugged it before it caught anything on fire. She seemed off, but I thought it was just because of the oven smoking. She told me that she was homeless after a hurricane that hit us a few years ago, and her temporary housing had caught on fire because of a dishwasher malfunction, and so she was extra spooked. I thought nothing of it and ended the conversation saying goodnight before I returned to bed. Well, she starts banging on my door around 1 a.m. because she can't find her phone. I think nothing of it because it probably got tossed somewhere as the oven started smoking, and as a neighbor, I was happy to help. I gave her my number just in case she needs anything. The next day, she texts me asking for a ride and I don't have a car, so I declined. Then she asked me some questions about the apartment, which I'm happy to answer since I've lived here for over a year now. She asked me to share my Wi-Fi and claims that she would pay for half, but I decline because that can be super dangerous, but I make up an excuse. All the red flags are up now. I drop hints multiple times that I'm busy, but she will not stop texting me for about an hour. After she sends me like 10 texts in a row, I straight up tell her that I'm busy and she apologizes. The next day, our power goes out, so I reach out. Apparently, hers went out first and she contacted maintenance, but they won't fix it for a few more weeks. Eventually, mine comes back on 30 minutes later, but hers does not. A few hours later in the middle of the night, I hear her fire alarm beeping again, so I text to make sure she's okay. She calls me and tells me the fire alarm was going off for no reason, and then trauma dumps on me. She tells me that her ex-husband works for our local police and that he's harmful and out to get her. She told me that people purposefully set her housing on fire on July 4th with fireworks to kill her pets and suggested that her ex was behind it. I looked up the house fires in our area and even our whole state on or near July 4th, and no results came up. She told me that the entire police department was corrupt, which I can believe, but they were also out to get her. She told me that her children think that she's crazy and have been manipulated by her ex. She told me that she's considered offing but won't do it because of her faith. I told her on the phone that I'm setting boundaries, that she isn't allowed to contact me unless there's an emergency, and that she cannot continue to trauma dump on me. She goes on a rant about how she wasn't trauma dumping, wasn't on drugs, which I never asserted, and wasn't over there setting fires, which I also never asserted, before talking about how that she would never off herself once more, and then saying goodnight and hanging up. That night, I contact my landlord about everything, and they informed me about the maintenance issues over at her apartment, explaining why the fire alarm went off the first time, which I already knew, and the next morning, they told me that they were going to ask her to not contact her neighbors at night. The maintenance manager called me about my electric being out, and I mentioned that mine came back, but hers did not. The maintenance manager told me that my issue was unrelated to hers, and they were about to call her. About 30 minutes later, I hear her yelling and then screaming on the phone at whom I presume was the maintenance manager. I heard her exclaim that she never did anything wrong and she was getting her life back together, followed by some door slams. At this point, I was really worried for my safety, but she didn't knock on my door or anything and hasn't attempted to contact me since. I'm more so worried about her setting our building on fire, given her history. I don't know if there were 2 fires or if there was 1, but I'm just very, very concerned. Our walls are made out of concrete, so I'm less worried about the walls catching fire and more worried about the roof and the ceiling. I have a cat and I live here alone. I'm afraid to leave the house in case he's trapped here if she sets the apartment on fire. I'm putting together a bag of essentials and my most sentimental items. Going through all of them has been really emotional. I have places that I can probably stay at if it all falls apart, but I'm just still terrified nonetheless. I'm a grad student on grad student pay. I have renter's insurance, but I'm still worried about recovering financially, let alone emotionally, if she burns my apartment down. I'm afraid I'll have to delay graduating if this happens. It's already taken an emotional toll on me, and I cannot focus on schoolwork. I don't know what else to do beyond what I've done so far. Any advice would be appreciated. Do you agree with this comment? OP replies, so call Adult Protective Services so they can do a wellness check. Smart on you for setting boundaries and continue to keep the landlord informed. OP says, I would, but I'm concerned that she would know that I did it and retaliate against me. She hasn't made a threat against me yet, but I'm very fearful of her. I mean, hey, it could be another neighbor that actually reports her. She doesn't know it has to be you. What do you think? First experience with the 100% authentic Karen, posted by Dirk Pita. I'm a 28-year-old male and I'm a customer service representative for a very reputable insurance company in the US. I have experience in this job in different companies ever since I finished high school. Now, as a disclaimer, I do not and would never work in underwriting. I'm just in charge of regular CSR stuff. I don't have a say on insurance claims, and that's an entirely different department. Also, I'm an outsourced employee. Most customers don't mind. Some occasionally ask where I'm from, and then there's the very rare butthole that asks for someone that speaks English as soon as they hear my accent. I don't care. I'm used to it. Generally speaking, American customers are very nice and patient, more than the ones in my country. So I never really understood where do all the retail and customer service horror stories from the internet came from. Today, I did. So, Karen calls. As soon as I answer, I hear a lot of background noise, and the first thing that I do after introducing myself is to ask for the policy number. I hear a man in the background yell, and between a lot of noise, what I realize is, in fact, the policy number, and I ask him to repeat it since I could not hear very well. Karen decides to take the lead and let me know that she is driving through the interstate while calling me and that she does not want me to waste her time. I'm like, okay, how can I help you? I kid you not when I tell you this woman started screeching to the point that I had no idea what she was saying. Yes, I am not a native English speaker, but it's never been a barrier for me. I could not, for the life of me, understand why this woman was so angry. Between the insane yelling, I can make up something about her policy being canceled and her being charged anyways. And seeing the direction that this call was going, I decided that my best move was to immediately contact a supervisor through chat to get some assistance. I informed Karen of this, and I asked her to give me just a few minutes while I check on my side of the screen with what is happening with her policy. Karen, however, decided that I was a genie and I was supposed to grant her wishes and solve the issue that she was having without even knowing what it was and without checking for possible solutions. She decided that I was not allowed to place her on a hold, but I've had my share of angry customers and I know better than to let them take control of the call. So I explicitly tell her that if she wants my help, she will need to cooperate with me and to let me figure out what is going on. She reluctantly agrees, but says she will be counting when I specify the hold will not be longer than 5 minutes. First supervisor interaction, and I'm just like, I have no idea what this woman wants. She's yelling at me, very angry. What's happening here? So we start piecing together emails and notes and everything left and realize that she requested for the policy to be canceled and provided proof to have a backdate cancellation, and it was all processed smoothly. She even got a response telling her that she would get the refund that she expected, and now I was even more confused. My assumption was that maybe she was just angry because she hasn't been refunded yet, which is just bank time shenanigans and, well, nothing we can do about it. So I'm like, okay ma'am, don't worry, you will be getting your refund, it's just bank timing. And that's when she informs me, at least in a coherent way, the real issue. She was magically charged again last night. So I double check and triple check with my supervisor. There are literally no traces of this supposed charge that she got last night. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't really believe that she was lying about it, we had no proof of it. So I asked her to send us a copy of the bank statement so we can issue a refund right away. And she just loses it. Once again, she starts screeching about how she's driving to go into surgery, how she's going to sue the company, me personally, all the colorful insults that you can imagine, including my accent and country of origin. How we stole her money and she wants hers back. I insist that I just need some record of it to issue the refund. I genuinely try to reason with her, explaining to her that I can't just issue a refund for someone who calls asking for it when we're not showing it in our system, and that I genuinely want to help her. Apparently, she was so freaking angry, she was driving like a maniac and got pulled over by the police and was given a ticket. She asked for my name so she could send me the ticket, as she was not going to pay for it because we were the ones causing her distress. I kindly explained to her that she shouldn't be calling while driving, and that is not our responsibility. However, I gave her my name. Good luck with that, I'm on the other side of the world. Anyway, she said that's what hands-free is for, and I had to hold back laughing because it only then hit me how stupid this woman clearly was. The part that really got under my skin was not the insults and the yelling, the racism or whatever. It was just how insanely unreasonable this woman was. Her concern was completely valid, and I told her multiple times that she was right to be upset and right to call us to get things fixed. But she needed to cooperate with me, and she was just hell-bent on releasing all of her anger and frustration on me. She literally would scream insults at me and then stop and say, "What else can I call you so you can understand how angry I am?" The worst part is that in my employee handbook, I am 100% allowed and justified to hang up on a customer like this. Karen thought she had some sort of hold over me, but that was not the case. I could have ended the 2-hour-long call at any time that I wanted with all the verbal abuse that she was throwing at me, but I still wanted to help her because I did believe that if she was being charged, it was unfair and I had to fix it. I started to get suspicious when she consistently refused to send me proof of the charges, no matter how much that I reassured her that this would all be fixed as soon as she did. It came to a point where she started telling me that if she died in surgery and made her husband a widow, it would be my personal fault. Don't ask me why, but that made me snap. For the first time in the call, I told her to not speak to me like that and to not say stuff like that. She was so thrown aback from my reaction that she calmed down for 5 minutes, give or take. I actually had hope then that maybe we could end this on a good note, but to no avail. Karen still wanted me to trust her word that she was being charged $59 on a canceled policy and wanted the money back. I finally told her that if she was not willing to send proof to dispute the charges with the bank. She said that she shouldn't have to call her bank, and I told her, "You've told me many times that this is illegal and fraud. Given what you've told me yourself, I strongly encourage you to dispute the charges with your bank." I asked if there was anything else that I could do for them, and I ended the call while they were still insulting me. I changed my status to take a breather and realized that most of my coworkers were looking at me, extremely concerned. Apparently, the yelling could be heard through my headset. My supervisors, more than one joined in to help, congratulated me for keeping my cool and keeping control of the call. I still feel guilty because I couldn't help her. I'm not saying this for pity points, I really do. I was just so willing to help her because I love my job. But she just wanted someone to be mad at. Screw you, Karen. Sued HOA Karen for towing my project car off my driveway. I live in a quiet town. Aside from a loudmouth know-it-all HOA Karen, she's a woman known for her relentless pursuit of what she considered neighborhood perfection. She has about as much grace as a baby deer who still has the wobbles in his legs. We affectionately called her HOA Karen, and she had a knack for scrutinizing every lawn, every flower bed, and, unfortunately for me, every parked car. My project car, a rusty yet hopeful relic of my automotive dreams, had found its temporary home in my driveway. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't functional at that moment, but it was my passion project. However, HOA Karen had other ideas. So one sunny Saturday morning, I was woken up by the grating sound of a tow truck pulling up to my driveway. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and I stumbled over to my window, only to witness HOA Karen herself directing the tow truck driver to hitch up my beloved project car. It was a real surreal sight, a suburban showdown over in broad daylight. So I rushed outside in my pajamas. I'm desperately trying to reason with Karen. I'm like, what on earth are you doing, Karen? You just can't tow my car. So with a haughty expression, she replied, "It's an eyesore, dear. We can't have this junk ruining the aesthetic of our lovely neighborhood." Before I could protest further, my project car was hoisted onto the tow truck and off it went, leaving me standing in disbelief on my own driveway. I knew that I had to take a stand, so I decided to take HOA Karen to court. The legal battle that ensued was anything but pleasant. Karen, true to form, tried to paint me as the neighborhood troublemaker, claiming that I was lowering property values with my unsightly car. But I had evidence. Photos of my car in its designated spot, witnesses who attested to its temporary nature, and a history of neighborhood disputes involving Karen. As the case unfolded in court, it became apparent that Karen's obsession with neighborhood aesthetics was more of a personal vendetta than a general concern for property values. The judge saw through this facade, and after a tense legal skirmish, I emerged victorious. Karen offered to pay damages for the wrongful towing and was prohibited from interfering with my property in the future. The victory was sweet, but the aftermath was even sweeter. HOA Karen, now nursing her wounded pride, avoided eye contact whenever she passed by my house. Gone were the judgmental glances and disapproving frowns. The once overbearing presence of HOA Karen was reduced to a mere shadow, and my project car, now back in its rightful place, became a symbol of triumph. The neighborhood, witnessing Karen's defeat in court, began to question her self-appointed role as the arbiter of aesthetic standards. The community, it seemed, had grown tired of her domineering ways. Slowly but surely, other residents began asserting their right to express themselves through their home and their possessions. As for me, I continued working on my project car, now with a renewed sense of pride and vindication. The victory in court was not just about a car, it was about standing up to unreasonable authority and defending the right to pursue one's passions, no matter how unconventional they may be. Our neighborhood learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes it takes a rusty car and a determined owner to remind a community that diversity, even in the form of a slightly dilapidated project car, is what makes a neighborhood truly vibrant. And so life continued with a little less interference from HOA Karen and a little more acceptance of individuality. I'm thinking she had like a power trip going on here, because she could have just said, hey, I don't like your car, but instead she went an illegal extra mile and thinking that that would just do it, but it didn't. I mean, come on, if you stand up to her, it's only going to take a second to realize she's a farce. What would have you done? Insane Karen neighbor story time. How would you handle her? I thought we were just being paranoid. Lesson learned, trust your gut by Wadia729. And there's an update with a conclusion. So my husband and I thought we were just overthinking the situation, but nope, we were right all along. We bought our first and current home just over 2 years ago. We were so excited to get into a house and we're really looking forward to getting out of apartment living. But it has turned out to be a complete disaster. It all started with the neighbors behind us. They were mowing 8 feet over the lot line, and they have a 120-pound Husky Lab German Shepherd mix who they let out with no fence, tether, or leash. After he charged at our 4-pound puppy, the wife had to wrestle the dog to the ground and the husband just went inside. We had a fence installed. Very long story short, the fence ticked them off beyond belief because children should be able to play wherever. Except never once did we see their kids out back. We thought the fence would be the end of it, but you know where this is going. Now, they ram our fence with their lawnmower whenever they can, and they throw trash over the fence into our property. We couldn't figure out where the hostility was coming from until I heard the wife talking to her mom or mother-in-law about us. They don't even have kids. They took that house from a family who deserves it. Just a note, our house is a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and is just under 1,100 square feet. This is not a home built for kids, but it's just the right fit for us, our dog, and 2 cats. We thought this was just them and not the attitude of everyone around us. But then I started hearing whispers, upper Midwest whispering that you're absolutely supposed to hear, from some neighborhood parents about the same thing. They don't have kids, they don't belong here. Again, this was like the same 3 sets of parents who all have kids the same age who play together. A few entitled parents who judge me for not being a mother is nothing new, and most parents don't give a crap if you tell them that you don't have or want kids, so whatever. This goes on for a while, and we just wrote it off as a few bad eggs. Then, a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were sniping at each other while carrying in groceries from the car. As we're putting the groceries away and laughing, the cops show up at our door. Where we live, we have very strict domestic violence laws, so usually someone gets arrested if the cops get a domestic call. It was pretty obvious that no one was at risk of anything, and I go back inside. We immediately pull up the live feed from our Ring cam and catch the cops' conversation. Officer says, "Yeah, this was nothing. If my neighbors called the office every time my wife and I snapped at each other, they'd be over every day." Sergeant replies, "This was a huge waste of our time. I'm going to go over and I'll talk to the caller. We never should have been called. I'm so tired of coming into this neighborhood." We see the sergeant walk over across the street, and we couldn't hear what he said, but it was pretty obvious he was less than happy with the neighbors who called. The husband started shouting, "We have kids. They shouldn't have to listen to this." And the sergeant said something that shut him up and wrote a ticket, which turned out to be a ticket for a false report. We were very upset about the cops being called to our home. We knew how close we came to one of us getting arrested over nothing. We talked to our next door neighbor, who we love and who is getting their house ready to sell. She said, "Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything because my ex-husband and I had issues with this same group for years, and we didn't want to get involved. But there is a group of parents who talk about you guys all the time, and they're working together to get you to leave. They think that you shouldn't be living in this neighborhood since you don't have kids. We had issues with them because my ex-husband is black, and the neighbors didn't want black kids running around the neighborhood. The cops used to be called all the time when our kids were playing outside, so the cops know about the parents on this street. Now they write tickets every time that they're called to the neighborhood, and it turns out to be nothing. We couldn't believe it. Confirmation that there really is a mommy mafia conspiracy that's out to get us, and they're super racist to boot. Later that day, we were on our way back to our house from a dog walk and saw the guy who called the cops on us talking to our next door neighbor, and she was flipping her crap on him. I've told you over and over not to call the cops about every little thing. I have black kids who have black friends, and the last thing I need is a dead kid because of you. You can take your BLM sign and shove it up your butt. You called over nothing. My kids could have been hurt. We don't know what to do at this point. We're surrounded by really mean racist parents who, apparently, are going to constantly call the cops on us until they run us out. We just had an incident this morning. We caught the neighbors behind us letting their huge dog into our fenced-in yard to poop. Full-on trespassing, opened our gate and everything. My husband went out there and got upset with them, and all they did was go inside without their dog. They just left him in our yard. My husband came inside, called animal control, and forwarded the ring footage of them opening the gate to the same sergeant who came by our house on the domestic call. When the cops and the animal control showed up, the wife came out back to try and sneak the dog back into the house and was caught by one of the cops in our yard. We don't know what happened after that, but hopefully we'll get an update soon. Here's the update a few months later. So the next door neighbors who we got along really well with moved out, which made us very sad. By the time they were gone for good, they had ran out of craps and told every one of our neighbors exactly what they thought of them. It was hilarious, but laughing audibly every time we heard them call someone a racist didn't earn us any points with the cabal of butthole parents, so we're still putting up with some crap. The neighbors behind us, who ran our fence and opened our gate to let their dog crap in our yard and then get caught by the cops, they have gone largely quiet. There was a ticket for trespassing and animal control threatened to remove their dog, so they've been avoiding us. They still ram our fence with their lawnmower and stomp all over our plants, but we got some revenge. My husband was working from home and the internet went out. He went to go check the router and noticed a technician from our ISP working on the box that sits on the easement between us and the butthole neighbors behind us. Husband went out and asked what's up. The tech said that our neighbor's internet went out and they just needed to replace a part quick. No biggie, right? Husband's ears perk up and he asked the tech what part was being replaced. The tech showed him and he said he wasn't sure how it could happen. Husband said, "Hey, could that have been caused by someone repeatedly ramming the box with the lawnmower?" The tech says, "Yeah, definitely." Husband says, "Out of curiosity, when did neighbor Butt call you to tell you his internet was out?" "Well, about 10 this morning." The husband proceeds to go grab his tablet and pulls up our ring footage from about 9:30 that morning, where neighbor Butthole clearly rams not only our fence, but also slams into the electrical boxes very hard, multiple times with his lawnmower. Tech asks husband to forward him the video, and husband does and goes inside. He tells me while I'm at work to pull up the live stream of our ring, and there's the tech standing next to the electrical box, showing Butthole neighbor the damage along with the footage the husband provided. Butthole neighbor says, "Well, I'm not paying for this." The tech says normal aging wear and tear is one thing, but this is property damage. Here's a bill for $1,200, and if you don't pay it, your internet will be canceled and it can go to collections. Gosh, it was funny. Didn't help our relationship with these people, but whatever. We got new next door neighbors recently, and they seem nice, but they are still learning how suburban America works. They are an Eastern European family with a dark history. Slobodan tried to off Grandma and Grandpa back in the 90s. They were refugees in Europe for a long time before they were able to come here to America, and this is their very first house since losing theirs during the genocide. The family is Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, Dad, and 2 young kids. Any complaints that we have about them are minor, and they're getting the hang of it. They are super proud of finally having a home of their own. But I guess the biggest development is that we've decided to leave. We had a meeting with our realtor on Wednesday, and we're going to settle on a timeline as soon as he gets back to us. We bought our house less than 3 years ago, but housing prices jumped up so much that in that time, we're going to walk away with over $100,000 when everything is said and done. It does feel like that we're letting the buttholes win, but we came to realize that we're not happy in suburbia and it's not worth it to stay just so we don't let butts win. We're planning on downsizing, going full millennial tiny home, and buying a liveaboard boat. Between COVID and our terrible experience in this neighborhood, husband and I are very tired of humanity and need a break. Luckily, the sale of our house will net us enough to cover all of our debt and most of the cost of the kinds of boats that we're looking at. So we'll be cutting our cost of living by at least 60% and starting off on an amazing new adventure. We can't wait to get the heck out of this nightmare of a neighborhood. We've also come to realize our part in this. The fact that we didn't really think about where our house was and focused only on the house itself when we bought it. It occurred to us recently that being child-free in a high-demand suburb with the best schools in the state didn't make much sense. That, and we all got new tax assessments, and ours jumped up by a staggering $58,000. So, screw paying those property taxes. HOA wants to demolish improvement made to my property, posted by Deleted. I live in a small condo building, 34 units, and have served as vice president on the board previously. When I was on the board, all architectural improvements required board approval. The new HOA president lives 2 units down from me. 2 months ago, I discussed with him the improvements that I was planning on making to my unit so that we could make sure that they would get approved. We planned on replacing some tile with hardwood flooring, redoing the fireplace, and putting tile on the balcony outside. The president said he just needed an architectural change request for the hardwood flooring, as it was the only change that requires board approval, so we put it in and we received approval. The president stopped by numerous times while the work was being commenced, commenting on how nice everything was looking and how the work we were doing to the balcony addresses a problem that some of the balconies have, cracks in them. Fast forward to this month. The HOA received a settlement against the builder's insurance for $1 million and decided to spend it on fixing up the building, replacing roof, repainting, addressing cracks in the stucco, etc. Part of these changes is doing work on the balconies to address cracks in the slabs. In a meeting with the construction company hired to do the repair, the company stated that they will be demolishing any tile put on balconies as part of the work that they're doing. I talked to the HOA president after the meeting, and he told me that he doesn't remember saying that I didn't need an architectural change request for the balcony tile and its exclusive use common property. It's literally been 2 months since I spent over $3,000 to put tile on my balcony, and I'm ticked. He saw the work being done, never once said, "Hey, you need to get this approved," nor did the HOA ever send me a letter. He even commented on how nice the tile was. There isn't anything wrong with my balcony, it looks great and it's structurally sound. The company doing work on the building is putting up the scaffolding, and I'm worried that they're just going to come in and jackhammer the balcony tile while I'm gone at work. My understanding is that the exclusive use common property thing gets thrown around a lot when HOAs don't want to pay for repairs to things like pipes and so on. Why am I being forced to undergo a repair that my unit doesn't need that's going to cost both the HOA and me money? I'm getting a copy of my CC&Rs today, but I would like to understand what my options are in terms of at least getting the HOA management company and the construction company notified that I want to put this in arbitration and for them to not demolish the tile until a decision is made whether they are authorized to do so or required to put the balcony back in its previous state. I don't understand why I simply can't sign an agreement stating that I will pay for any needed repairs to my balcony when it needs them versus destroy an improvement to do an inferior form of cosmetic improvement. Oh, do you agree with this commenter? So you started work on an outside balcony in a condo complex without first reading your CC&Rs? I think you'll likely find that you'll be getting an expensive lesson in condo ownership. Do you agree with that or not? Let me know. Get rid of my lady layer that came with the house? Sorry, HOA, you approved the sale by Free Range Feral. When we bought our house, the largest in the hood and the original showcase home for the development, there was a shed in the backyard. My lady layer, if you will. The home sale was approved by the HOA and a letter of no violations was issued. All good, right? The home unfortunately came with scads of abandoned property. Within 24 hours of taking possession of our home, the former owners broke back in to remove what was now legally ours, a suitable story for entitled people. I stopped at the security guard shack to inquire about ensuring that the former owner's gate codes were inactivated and to keep an eye out for any attempt at continued entry into the gated hood. The guard assured me that he would handle it, and I went on my way. That evening, the guard came to my home to give me additional info that I might need and offered security cam footage for the police. I thanked him for taking the time to make me feel safe in my new home, but before he left, he said, Just to warn you, the HOA will go after you for your shed. They want it gone. After a bit more discussion, he informed me that the former owners were not only bat crap crazy, but had gone toe-to-toe with the HOA over the shed. 3 years and lawyers all around the HOA finally said, screw it, this is costing us too much money, and their lawyer is better than ours, and they dropped the whole thing. Within 2 weeks, I had 2 different neighbors tell me the HOA would give me problems over the shed. Oh, fun! At the 3-week mark, an inspector from the county showed up to tell me he was investigating an anonymous complaint about code violations, and the shed, visible only if you stood on my property, was in violation with the county as there was no permit for it. I was livid and already considering what avenues I had to keep my shed or win compensation for the loss of property when the code enforcer smiled a devious smile at me, handed me a printout, and said, all you need to do is fill this out, pay $50 to the county, and you will be in code compliance. He then said that Mr. Littleman Syndrome, the anonymous complaint, cannot touch your shed after that. The key here is that 4 years ago, when they were battling the former residents, the county did not permit sheds, and the bylaws say all additional property structures require permits. If there is no permit, the HOA can order the removal and fine the resident until it's gone. 2 years ago, the county started permitting sheds, and the HOA was unaware of the change. I paid my $50 and I got the permit, making my lady lair code compliant and untouchable by the HOA. I also made a new friend in code enforcement, and all is well in my 150 square foot slice of heaven. Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.